It appears that many years ago, the United States was aware that communists were attempting to infiltrate our society, so our leaders educated the public of this danger to our constitutional freedoms. Today, Jeff Grossman and I will be talking about Plank 5 of the Communist Manifesto. First, I want to bring attention to a lecture by a woman who saw her country of Austria go from freedom to a dictatorship under Hitler in less than 5 years. It began by trusting the very government they elected.
The election was over. We voted 98%, and we celebrated. We danced in the streets. For 3 days, we celebrated. We had candlelight parades, and we danced in the streets, and we were so happy, so happy. And of course, all the good things came first. The Red Cross came in and fed all our hungry people, and Hitler said, "Oh, we're going to help the families and the elderly and the children. You have to get back in a normal, good living standard." We believed everything what Hitler said. He talked like an American politician. Hitler was very clever. He was not at all portrayed as a monster at that time. He was a very clever geopolitical politician. We had a huge welfare system because everybody was entitled to something. And also, we found that the so-called Equal Rights Amendment was not only used to trick the women into equal rights, it was used to equalize the wealth of the country. It was equalized socially and economically. Socially, to take the children literally away from the parents and let the state raise them as they want to mold them. And economically, to equalize the wealth, to give to those who have not, and take from those who have by means of taxes. When I say a means of taxes, our taxes, they escalated up to 70% because the Equal Pay Act was also passed. Everybody was entitled to a equal income. And by doing that, it was done, like for instance, the government set a scale that you are entitled to a certain amount of income. And if your workplace did not achieve that, you got free housing, you got food stamps, you got all kinds of extras, fuel, whatever, so that the standard of the income came up equally with everybody else. So we had a total equal income system. Today it's called socialism, that everybody has the same, but of course it doesn't work. And then with the guaranteed income, you were entitled, well, of course, the child care was free, and of course your health care was free, and if your housing, you got free housing, you got free fuel, and that is how it was equalized.
Okay, now Jeff Grossman is my guest today. We will be talking about Plank 5 of the Communist Manifesto, which he'll talk about what that is, and how we're going to be talking about how our government is becoming more centralized in a pretty scary way, I think. Thanks, Jeff, for being here.
Glad to be here, Veronica.
So you again are a constitutional lover. You have studied it.
Yeah,
and,
don't call me a scholar. I'm a passionate student.
A passionate student. And, you know, as we all should be, and I think we used to be in the United States just through school. But
Well, John Jay actually said that, one of the writers of the Federalist Papers said that we all have an obligation to know our Constitution so we'll know when our rights are being violated.
yeah, yeah, and it's being violated left and right. The show, the clip that we just watched was a woman who, she was almost one of Hitler's youth. She really was for a real short time until her mom got smart and said, you know, you're going somewhere else. We're going to cross the border. But Hitler centralized power to such a large degree that he was able to take over, and in the exact same way that we see happening right now in the United States.
Well, from a financial standpoint, he took advantage of the turmoil caused by the hyperinflation in the late 1930s. Mm-hmm. And that was part of his lever to seizing power through other avenues as well.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we have a depression. I don't know if this is what you mean, but what she was talking about is we have this depression going on, and we...
By hyperinflation, I mean it takes a wheelbarrow full of cash to buy a loaf of bread. And that's a little scary because, I mean, going ahead to after what we're going to talk about, with $16 trillion in debt, there's very few ways out of our debt hole. One of them is severe inflation.
Well, then, I guess without further ado, what is Plank 5 of the Communist Manifesto?
Well, Plank 5 is the centralization of credit in the hands of the state, and by means of a national bank using state capital and an exclusive monopoly. So when you do that, you basically centralize power.
And so can a monopoly mean not just the bank, though? Can it mean, like, let's say, GE, AT&T, the internet, you know, where we see that our current government right now is, he calls it a public-private partnership, where basically the government winds up with its tentacles throughout all those private organizations.
When you talk about that stuff, we're talking, my term for that is crony capitalism.
Was that also, though, increasing financial power, you know, putting power into the central government?
Well, to the extent that, like, GE has a major credit arm, potentially, yes. But the centralization of credit itself and the money supply, that's governed by the Federal Reserve, our central bank. Because a central bank typically has a number of different functions that it performs. It manages the currency. Michael Savage, for example, says that what defines a country is border, language, culture. But there's a fourth item, and that's currency. Also, a central bank is going to control the money supply, and that's one of the things that the Federal Reserve does, is they make money appear overnight with computers. And it also controls interest rates. So these are the functions of a central bank. And another aspect of central bank, which is, to me, a little disturbing, is autonomy. Because the Federal Reserve, excuse me, operates pretty much by itself. And there's a number of things that central banks are deemed to have desirable characteristics, such as legal independence. The Federal Reserve gets its independence statutorily. And they set their own goals. They operate independently, and they manage things independently, which sort of comes with legal independence. But these are the things that are deemed essential for a central bank to do its job. But if you go back and look at what the central bank is doing, it's really a consolidation of centralized power. So the concept is central bank needs some independence in order to consolidate power. Now, is the Federal Reserve really independent? That's hard to say what goes on behind the scenes. And you know, the founding of the country, there was the Federalists were in favor of central banking, and the Anti-Federalists were not. Hamilton was a big proponent of central bank, and the first bank of the United States was started under John Adams' presidency when Hamilton was Secretary of the Treasury. Now, Hamilton, of course, didn't last after 1804 because he kind of got done in by a duel with Aaron Burr. But there were some people that, in our founders, that were really cautious. Thomas Jefferson said, and this talks about private banks, and I'll explain why that's relevant. Thomas Jefferson said, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks will deprive the people of all property, and their children will wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. And he also said a private central bank issuing the public currency is a greater menace to the liberties of the people than a standing army.
Isn't that exactly what happened?
Yes, well, the real, I mean, there was the first United States bank, the second, the third U.S. bank actually was the Federal Reserve that was created in 1913, which was a really bad year because that was the same year that we went to direct election of the senators, and the Federal Reserve Act was signed into law by Woodrow Wilson, who gave us the League of Nations and eventually the United Nations.
Oh, boy.
So 1913 was
He
not
was
a good year.
Yeah, great president there. Didn't I read somewhere that the Federal Reserve Bank came in kind of blindsided by the people?
Well, there was a public debate. There was it Senator Aldridge, and in fact, if you're interested in the history of the Federal Reserve, there's a book called Creature from Jekyll Island. It's the most well-known book about the Federal Reserve, and it gets its name from a rather secret meeting that was held in Jekyll Island. It was either North or South Carolina with Senator Aldridge and some major U.S. and European bankers. But it didn't come as a surprise. And there was a lot of debate, and it wasn't overwhelmingly passed, the law, but it was. And I just want to give you another comment, two more. James Garfield, president, said, "Who controls the volume of money in any country is the master of all its legislation and commerce." And John Maynard Keynes, the economist, said that Lenin is said to have declared the best way to destroy the capitalist system was to debauch the currency, which brings us right back to the Communist Manifesto, because that's what has happened with the Federal Reserve. In fact, Ben Bernanke actually admitted in testimony before Congress that the Federal Reserve caused the Great Depression. And that was a huge deflationary event.
And that was on purposeful?
No,
possibly?
because my theory is they're profoundly incompetent.
Oh.
So the Federal Reserve, in managing monetary policy and money supply, is always fighting the last battle, not the current one. And as a result, they always overcorrect in whatever they do.
Do you think they're incompetent right now, or do you think that they're trying to pull a fast one on us?
Right now, I would not credit what they're doing to incompetency.